King Charles has named his youngest brother, Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, a title held, of course, by his late father, Prince Philip, for more than 70 years. It had been the late Prince's wish for Prince Edward to be granted the dukedom after his death.
It's been a bit of a shock. However much one tries to prepare oneself for something like this, it's still a dreadful shock, and we're still trying to come to terms with that. And it's very, very sad.
For months, the royal family's international image has rested heavily on Queen Camilla's public appearances. But a sudden royal shakeup has left Buckingham Palace reeling. In a move no one saw coming, Prince Edward has reportedly cancelled Camilla's much-anticipated European tour, announcing that Princess Catherine will represent the crown instead. This decision isn't just surprising, it's seismic. Behind the grandeur lies growing speculation about internal power struggles, health concerns, and quiet tensions. What forced this dramatic change? And what does it reveal about the monarchy's future? The bombshell that rocked the palace. Imagine waking up to a world where the quietest royal suddenly becomes the loudest voice in the room. That was the shock London woke up to one crisp morning, a day that began like any other, but would end shaking the very walls of Buckingham Palace. The palace had just released a statement so unexpected that even the most seasoned royal watchers gasped. Prince Edward, the mild-mannered, dutiful brother, known for his calm presence and steady loyalty, had done the unthinkable. He had cancelled Queen Camilla's highly anticipated European royal tour. And this wasn't just another royal trip filled with handshakes and polite smiles. It was meant to be her moment. Months in the making, the tour had been carefully crafted to present Camilla as the rock beside King Charles. The Queen, who would stand unshaken through storms. There were gala dinners on the calendar, cultural visits lined up, and meetings with world leaders planned down to the minute. Every flight, every meal, every camera angle had been meticulously arranged. Then, with a single announcement, it all vanished. Invitations were withdrawn. Private jets that had been fueled and ready were grounded. Luxury hotels that had been reserved for the entourage quietly canceled bookings. But the real shock wasn't the cancellation itself. It was who Edward chose to replace her. He handed the assignment to Princess Catherine, the ever-graceful Princess of Wales. Overnight, the balance inside the monarchy shifted. Whispers flew through royal corridors like a gust of cold wind. Advisors and aides exchanged worried glances. Was this a quiet coup? Had Edward just drawn the first line in a hidden royal war? The palace, usually so disciplined in its silence, was alive with murmurs. Camilla's response, or rather her silence, only fueled the storm. She said nothing publicly, but that silence was deafening. Those close to her spoke of shattered composure, of a woman who felt humiliated. For months, she had poured herself into the project, shaping every detail. And now it was gone, snatched away in front of the world. Behind the closed doors of Clarence House, the tension was almost physical. Some say fine china met its end that day. "How could he?" she reportedly cried. But Edward did not flinch. The once overlooked prince had found a voice that carried weight, a tone that reminded many of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, calm, decisive, yet unshakably firm. And this wasn't a rash move. Insiders revealed it was the result of weeks of quiet observation. With King Charles battling his private health struggles and passing more duties to others, Edward had begun to notice things. Camilla's tour, to him, seemed more about glamour than duty, a display that risked tainting the royal image at a delicate time. Some of the planned guests and hosts raised eyebrows too. Edward saw danger where others saw celebration. "Cancel it," he reportedly told aides. "The crown comes first." They warned him it would divide the family. "This could break us," one said. But Edward was resolute. "Better to bend now," he replied. then to shatter later. The final line of the official announcement carried quiet thunder. Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales, will represent the crown. And with that, the tide of public emotion turned. Across Britain, the people rallied around Catherine, the resilient princess who had weathered illness, gossip, and scrutiny with quiet strength. Crowds gathered at Kensington Palace holding signs that read, "Our true princess." It felt to many like a second coming of Diana's warmth, a reminder of what grace and empathy looked like on the royal stage. But behind the cheering, the shadows deepened. What had Edward seen or discovered that made him act with such boldness? What truth lay hidden behind the polished smiles and palace walls? One thing was certain. This was no simple act of defiance. It was the beginning of a story that would test loyalties, challenge legacies, and reveal just how fragile even the strongest crowns can be. Why would Prince Edward replace the Queen in such a manner? Could he have had something against Camilla? Let's find out. Shadows of simmering rivalries. Peel back the glittering facade of royal smiles, and what emerges isn't the calm dignity the cameras capture, but a simmering storm that had been brewing quietly for years. Behind the marble walls of the palaces, where the polished shoes echo on floors waxed to perfection, lay a cauldron of tensions, hidden beneath layers of duty, formality, and carefully rehearsed charm. The rift between Prince Edward and Queen Camilla didn't appear suddenly, like a thunderclap. It was a slow burn, years in the making, a clash not of personalities alone, but of philosophies. Edward, the steady and traditional son, carried the legacy of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, like a sacred torch. Camilla, the bold and confident consort, sought to redefine what the monarchy could be in the modern age. To her, change was survival. To him, it was erosion. From the earliest days of King Charles' reign, Camilla began taking bold steps. Steps that to many within the royal household felt more like leaps. She restructured events, shifted priorities, and positioned her family in places that once seemed reserved for those born into royal blood. Her children, once kept at a respectful distance from the spotlight, began appearing in official photos, attending receptions, even sharing the stage with senior royals. To the outside world, it was refreshing, an image of openness and warmth. But to Edward, it looked alarmingly like overreach. Little slights became hard to ignore. At state banquets, he'd find himself seated away from the inner circle, his presence barely acknowledged in the order of introductions. At receptions, Camilla's aides would sweep through the room like a tide, announcing names, yet sometimes skipping his altogether, as though he were invisible. It wasn't open hostility, but the quiet kind that cuts deeper. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, Edward's calm, composed wife, saw it all. She was the still lake to his stormy sea, observing with gentle wisdom and a quiet smile that never gave away her thoughts. Instead of feeding his frustration, she offered him balance. She found unexpected friendship in Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Over quiet teas, the two women would reflect on the late Queen's quiet strength and grace, both admiring how Elizabeth had ruled without vanity or spectacle. "Duty without vanity," Edward would often say, a phrase that became something of a private vow among the Wessexes and Waleses. Edward didn't strike out impulsively. He tried the peaceful path first. There were private conversations with Charles, heartfelt, cautious, always respectful. "Her influence is tipping the scales," Edward once warned. But Charles, ever the romantic, defended Camilla passionately. "She's modernizing us, Edward," he replied, his voice firm with love and loyalty. Each dismissal left Edward more isolated, more certain that the crown was drifting away from its foundation. The breaking point came quietly but decisively. Edward found himself excluded from key meetings about royal tours, roles he had held for years. Memos bypassed his desk. Camilla's team began taking control of diplomatic correspondence, cutting him out entirely. To him, this wasn't just palace politics. It was a slow dismantling of everything his mother had built. Night after night, he wandered the echoing halls of Bagshot Park, sleepless and restless. He would pause beneath portraits of his parents, his mind heavy with questions. Elizabeth had wielded power through restraint, grace, and silence. Camilla, he feared, was turning that sacred humility into a kind of performance, a monarchy of flash rather than faith. Soon, the whispers began, among staff, among aides, even in the stiff smiles exchanged at events. There was an invisible frost between Edward and Camilla, a polite coldness that everyone felt but no one dared name. Camilla would charm foreign dignitaries with her radiant laugh, while Edward stood quietly, his eyes steel-hard with resolve. And so, the tension grew, a quiet war masked by ceremony. Edward wasn't plotting rebellion. He was safeguarding legacy. But with every unheeded warning, every subtle power play, the monarchy edged closer to something dangerous. A public unraveling. When Edward finally vowed to act, not out of anger, but devotion, the stage was set. The world would soon see that behind the glittering crowns and golden carriages lay something far more human: ambition, loyalty, and the painful cost of silence. What could have triggered the action in the prince? Was Camilla found guilty of any offense? Let's delve into the details of the trigger that resulted in the replacement, the secret dossier, and a fateful midnight call. Now, let's peel back the curtain and confront the beating heart of the scandal, the confidential dossier that exploded like a grenade in Prince Edward's hands, setting off a chain of events that would reshape the monarchy's fragile balance. It began quietly. Weeks before the abrupt cancellation, an inconspicuous envelope from the Foreign Office arrived at Bagshot Park. It bore the stamp, "Restricted, eyes only." Nothing unusual, at least at first glance. Just another bundle of documents, security briefs, tour schedules, press outlines for Queen Camilla's upcoming European visit. But as Edward settled into his study that evening, sipping his tea and flipping through the pages, something caught his attention. The further he read, the colder his blood ran. Buried deep within the file were explosive revelations, secret arrangements that had never passed through palace channels. The papers detailed unauthorized side meetings organized by Camilla's closest aides, private sessions with European ministers, discreet dinners funded by luxury sponsors whose names triggered red flags. Some of those sponsors were tied to organizations under international investigation, shadowy corporations accused of money laundering and political manipulation. Worse still, several financial commitments had been made in the Queen's name, without any record of royal approval. This wasn't diplomacy. It was a minefield, one that blurred the sacred line between royal service and personal interest. Edward's mind raced. If even a fraction of this leaked, the damage would be catastrophic. "Queen's secret, deals exposed," the tabloids would scream. The monarchy's reputation, already delicate since Elizabeth's passing, would crumble overnight. Without hesitation, he called upon members of his late mother's old guard, those loyal, discreet aides who had mastered the art of quiet crisis management. Together, they dissected every memo, every email, every handwritten note. The truth emerged with chilling clarity. This was no misunderstanding. The optics were disastrous. "If this comes out mid-tour," one aide whispered gravely, "we don't just lose respect, we lose faith." The next morning, Edward summoned Camilla's private secretary to Bagshot. The air was thick with tension. "Explain these irregularities," Edward demanded, his tone calm but cutting. The response was dismissive. "Just "Efficient coordination, sir." Edward's reply landed like a blade. "Efficiency," he said, "should never compromise what Mother spent her life defending." The confrontation sent ripples through the palace corridors. Whispers spread, staff exchanged uneasy glances, and the atmosphere shifted from routine to alarm. Alone in his study, Edward wrestled with the impossible. He couldn't go public. It would be too destructive. He couldn't confront Camilla directly. The press would feast on it. But to do nothing was equally unthinkable. Then came the flash of inspiration, a solution both strategic and symbolic. Replace Camilla's tour with someone untainted, someone whose grace and dignity could steady the storm. Catherine, the people's favorite, the nation's quiet pillar. Past midnight, Edward picked up the phone. "Your Royal Majesty," he began, voice steady despite the weight in his chest. He laid out every detail, the sponsors, the risks, the headlines waiting to erupt. Charles listened in silence, drained from his treatments, torn between love and legacy. "This isn't about her," Edward said softly. "It's about us, what the world sees." There was a pause. Then the king's weary sigh. A pen scratched paper. "Do it." At 2:47 a.m., the order was official. Cancel Camilla's tour, assign Catherine. By dawn, the monarchy had changed course. Camilla's fury filled Clarence's house. "You let him humiliate me," she shouted. "Give it all to her then." The words echoed down the marble halls, a bitter crack in her once unshakable power. And so, the question remains, what else is hidden in that dossier? How close had disaster truly come? A midnight decision, a fragile crown, and a family forever changed. What ended Prince Edward's action? Did Camilla fight back? Let's dig into the details of what transpired afterwards. The climactic confrontation and a reborn monarchy. When the storm seemed to calm, and the palace appeared to return to its glittering calm, what truly brewed behind its golden walls was the final reckoning. A confrontation that would redraw loyalties, reshape power, and give birth to a new royal dawn. Camilla, bruised yet cunning, refused to go down quietly. From Clarence's house, she gathered her circle, sympathetic MPs, loyal aides, and a few trusted journalists. Behind closed doors, they plotted, whispered, and leaked. Stories soon appeared in the press portraying Prince Edward as overreaching, jealous, and desperate for influence. One columnist, clearly fed from within, mocked him openly. Unapproved ambition from the young prince. Overreach unbecoming of royalty. But the attack backfired. Within days, the tide turned. Palace staff, weary of the constant tension and manipulation, began abandoning Camilla's circle, resigning or seeking transfers. What was once her power base started crumbling, piece by piece. Even King Charles, once her steadfast ally, began retreating emotionally, exhausted by endless battles. The palace corridors, once filled with Camilla's presence, began to feel coldly quiet. Edward, however, struck back with quiet precision. He called for an emergency royal council meeting, walking in not with arrogance, but armed with facts and composure. In front of advisors, he laid out the leaks, the patterns, and the risks to the monarchy's image. "This ends now," he said firmly. It wasn't a plea, it was a statement. The council agreed. New protocols were issued. Prince Edward would oversee all upcoming royal tours and public engagements. Camilla would step back indefinitely. It was an unspoken dethronement, her influence clipped, her network scattered like autumn leaves in the wind. The defining moment came days later, in a private chamber inside Buckingham Palace. Only 3 were present: Edward, Camilla, and Catherine. The air was heavy, almost suffocating. For a long while, no one spoke. Then, Edward began, his tone calm but unyielding. "We serve the people before we serve ourselves. The crown must reflect unity, not rivalry." Camilla's face stiffened. Her voice trembled with fury and pain. "Betrayal! You and your perfect princess turned everyone against me." Her words hung like smoke, thick with years of resentment. Edward said nothing, but Catherine, graceful as ever, stepped forward gently. "There's only one crown," she said softly. "We either stand together under it, or we all fall apart." Her calm pierced through the tension like sunlight through fog. Camilla's shoulders sagged. The fight seemed to drain out of her. "Fine," she muttered at last. "I'll step back from the tours. No cheers, no victory speeches, just quiet acceptance." It was the end of an era. Later that night, when Charles heard the details, he sat in silence. "Perhaps this is destiny," he whispered. "The heart before the crown." Catherine's first press briefing after that meeting was a revelation. Poised, eloquent, and dignified, she spoke of service, compassion, and duty, echoing Queen Elizabeth's grace without mimicking her. "Duty," she said, "is not a burden. It's a calling." The world listened and believed. Headlines called her the People's Princess Reborn. Diplomats praised her authority without arrogance. As her plane took off for her first solo European tour, crowds cheered, waving flags and hope alike. In the quiet shadows of Clarence House, Camilla watched. Her era dimmed, her allies gone, yet the whispers remained. Would she fade away peacefully or rise again with a new plan? The saga didn't end. It only shifted. A living reminder that inside the royal circle, power never truly rests. It only changes hands. While many question Prince Edward's replacement, many questions keep popping up. Was Prince Edward's action illegitimate? Did he have the authority to carry out such replacements? Let's talk about how Prince Edward got the power to wield such authority. Why King Charles broke tradition. In November 2022, King Charles made a quiet yet remarkable move that spoke volumes about both tradition and change within the British monarchy. He formally asked the UK Parliament to amend a specific law governing royal responsibilities, a request that, on the surface, appeared procedural but carried deep symbolic weight. His goal was to include his sister, Princess Anne, and his youngest brother, Prince Edward, among the few royals permitted to serve as counselors of state, individuals authorized to act on behalf of the monarch when he is unable to perform his duties, either due to illness or absence from the country. Under normal circumstances, this adjustment might have seemed a routine matter of royal housekeeping, but for those who understand the intricacies of royal protocol, it hinted at much more. A subtle reorganization of trust, responsibility, and power within the royal family itself. By law, the roles of counselors of state are defined by two key legislations: the Regency Act of 1937 and its later update, the Regency Act of 1953. These acts specify that the counselors must include the monarch's spouse and the first four adults in the line of succession. That is, those over the age of 21, except for the heir apparent, who qualifies at 18. Moreover, they must all be British citizens residing in the United Kingdom. This arrangement, however, had begun to show cracks. When Charles ascended the throne following Queen Elizabeth II's passing, the existing list of counselors included individuals whose involvement in royal duties had become limited or even controversial. Prince Andrew, for instance, though still high in the line of succession, had stepped back from public life amid scandal. Prince Harry, too, was no longer a working royal and resided abroad. That meant, in practice, only a handful of the designated counselors were truly available or suitable to fulfill those constitutional duties should the king ever need to delegate them. It was within this context that Charles took action, a move both practical and deeply personal. He turned to those he trusted most, his loyal sister, Princess Anne, known for her unwavering sense of duty, and his dependable youngest brother, Prince Edward, who had spent decades quietly supporting the crown. The official royal website defines the role of counselors of state as individuals authorized to carry out most of the official duties of the sovereign. This includes attending Privy Council meetings, signing routine documents, and receiving the credentials of new ambassadors. The kind of steady, essential work that keeps the machinery of the monarchy turning smoothly. However, there are certain core constitutional powers that cannot be delegated, no matter the circumstance. Matters involving the Commonwealth, the dissolution of Parliament, unless explicitly instructed by the monarch, the creation of peers, and the appointment of a prime minister remain firmly in the hands of the reigning sovereign. These restrictions preserve the sacred boundaries of royal authority, ensuring that the monarch's most defining powers cannot be exercised by anyone else. For Charles, the proposed amendment was not merely a legal technicality. It was a statement of confidence and continuity, a reaffirmation that the institution must adapt while holding true to its essence. In requesting Parliament's approval to extend these responsibilities to Anne and Edward, the king was doing more than filling vacancies. He was subtly reshaping the operational face of the monarchy, aligning it with modern realities and with people whose loyalty had never wavered. Those who have followed royal affairs closely saw this as an early glimpse into Charles's leadership style, pragmatic yet deeply rooted in family trust. Princess Anne, often regarded as one of the hardest-working members of the royal family, embodies reliability and restraint, qualities essential for representing the crown. Prince Edward, too, has demonstrated a quiet steadiness, focusing on charitable work and royal duties away from the glare of controversy. In effect, this parliamentary request reflected a careful balance between law, tradition, and personal judgment. It acknowledged the limits of outdated arrangements while ensuring that the monarchy could continue functioning seamlessly in an age where the public demands both accountability and competence from its royal representatives. Thus, what began as a simple administrative proposal soon revealed itself to be a defining act of Charles's early reign, one that restructured the royal circle not through grand proclamations, but through strategic trust and quiet reform. It was a reminder that, even in the world's oldest monarchy, adaptation remains a royal duty. So, what do you think about Prince Edward's replacement for Camilla? Do you think it is enough as a consequence for her offense? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.